Okay, so next, making topography plots and plots of your waveforms. So this video assumes that you've already made your ERP set. So if I load up a grand average, let's take this one here. This ERP set that I've loaded is the grand average of all of my participants. So it's important to remember that this isn't a single participant, this is all of them grand average together. And for the most part, whenever you create waveforms or topography plots, you're probably going to want to use a grand average. You're not going to want to plot a single participant. There might be some unique cases where you do, but if you're at the beginning of learning how to conduct EEG analysis and pre-processing, then that's probably not what you're after. So you then want to hop back to the EEGLAB menu and you want to go down to plot. Here you've got a couple of options. For today, we're going to be looking at plot ERP waveforms, and we're going to be looking at plot ERP scout maps, because these are the things that you'll most likely be asked to report. So first of all, plot ERP waveform. Here you can see a number of options, and this menu might be a little bit overwhelming, but we'll go through them one by one. So first of all, you probably want to deselect all bins. I've got 6 conditions here. Remember, my bins correspond to conditions, and I don't necessarily want to plot all of them in one go. So I'm actually just going to choose conditions 3 and 4. If you're not entirely sure what your conditions are or which bins are which, you can go to Browse here and it'll bring up a list for you. Always check your ERP set here. Obviously, I've only got one loaded, so it doesn't make too much difference for me. But if you have, for example, all of your participants open in the ERP set menu, and you've created your grand average so that that becomes a new set, you want to always ensure that you've got the grand average selected, because plenty of times before now I've selected an individual participant, haven't noticed that the ERP set corresponds to an individual and not the grand average, and then panicked because my EEG data looks completely messy. Over here we're going to move to channels to plot, and again you probably don't want all of the channels. So it's unlikely you're going to remember exactly the number of the channels that you want. Here, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to click Browse and I'm going to choose CZ and CPZ. So the kind of electrodes you might be looking at if you were interested in doing some kind of M400 analysis. Sometimes this menu can be a bit glitchy. If you notice that your min or max seems particularly wild, this is usually because, at least in my case, I haven't ICA corrected my eye electrodes, and I actually exclude them from artifact rejection procedures. So this means that the grand average of the eye electrodes, if they're included initially in the scaling of the y-axis, pushes this to quite extreme thresholds, because you've still got the blinks included, but only in the eye electrodes. So once you deselect the eye electrodes and you select only the electrodes you want, this scale should come back down to a normal range. But if it doesn't, you just need to deselect and reselect, and it should update at that point. Decide whether or not you want positive up or down. I've never understood why people have positive down, but they do, and you might be asked to report your data in that way. And then your baseline correction window should correspond to the baseline correction window that you've selected. And that's pretty much it. So you can then press plot and you will get your electrodes that you've selected up as separate windows. You can't see here, but I have actually got my 2 conditions. The thing is that my 2 conditions are pretty consistent across the waveform. But you can see here that you've got the condition names, the bin number, you've got your waveform. And if you then want to use this waveform, which you probably will, you can typically go to File, Save As, and export this somehow. I find often it's useful to save it as SVG, because this offers you the opportunity to open up the graphic in PowerPoint, right-click, select Ungroup, and then actually move around different components. So it turns it from a solid image to different components, and you can change font size, you can change font itself. Whereas if you save either as the MATLAB figure or you save as one of these image types, you don't have the opportunity to later change elements of the image. So that's how you get your waveforms, and now your topography plots. So again, this assumes that you've got your grand average ERP set loaded, and you're going to go to plot ERP and plot ERP scalp maps. Again, here you're going to select your bins. So I want conditions 3 and 4. And latency. So this window is tied to your selection here. A lot of the time, particularly if you're running ANOVA on your data, you might want to choose mean amplitude between two fixed latencies. And this is because rather than giving you a instantaneous measure, so here if I type 300 and I type 600, for example, I'm only going to get shots in time of what my topography looks like at 300 or at 600. Whereas if I select mean amplitude, it's now going to give me the mean amps for the entirety of this window between 300 and 600. And this is usually more representative of what's going on if you've done your ANOVA on a mean amplitude window. Don't worry about changing time-lapse animation unless you're particularly interested in that. Baseline correction, again, leave it as pre. Map type 2D is usually fine, but you might want to mess around. This is more stylistic choices. It's not so much a case of being able to get this right or wrong. And color map, typically the most usually reported is jet here, and I prefer to have the color scale bar available to the reader so they can actually see what they're looking at. And then you've got various options where you can include bin descriptors, get rid of bin numbers, etc. You can choose to show your latency electrodes or get rid of them, and then you can click plot. And here you can see that I've got fairly standard looking, almost journal ready topography plots. Again, as before, you can file, save as, and choose SVG, and this will enable you to edit by right-clicking in PowerPoint and selecting Ungroup.